Welcome to the Program Monitoring Validations Training. LEA is providing private nonprofit equitable services must provide documentation regarding the LEA inventory control of purchases for equitable services. This presentation is intended solely to provide general information and guidance to Texas ESCs, LEAs, and participating private schools, and reflects the Texas Education Agency's current understanding of statute and applicable federal guidance. The content of this presentation is subject to change as a result of further potential information and guidance provided by federal agencies with regulatory oversight of these programs. This presentation does not constitute legal advice, and entities are, therefore, advised to seek legal counsel regarding the information and guidance provided in this presentation before acting on such information and guidance. Documenting overall compliance for a program requirement may require several forms of documentation to be maintained locally and available upon request by TEA and/or an auditor. To ensure overall compliance with program requirements, LEA should refer to the program guide and/or other program-related resources that reference the multiple forms of documentation required to be maintained locally. The documentation requested for submission during the random validation process may not include all forms of documentation that are required to be maintained locally. Given the increased use of virtual meeting environments, participant rosters that include the meeting title, meeting date, and stakeholder names and roles would be acceptable substitutes for the more traditional sign-in sheets. This eliminates the need of a participant signature. The documentation requested for submission during the random validation process may not include all forms of documentation that are required to be maintained locally. LEA staff should review the most current Program Monitoring Validations Process Handbook. It includes introduction, general information, a timeline of the program monitoring validation process from the point of LEAs being notified of selection through the TEA final results being shared with LEAs. In addition, LEAs must follow the instructions for submitting the documentation through the Federal Program Compliance Program Monitoring Validations Work App. The PMV Process Handbook also provides resources and tools to help LEAs with specific program guidance for selected validation item and a seamless transition through the submission process. This is a snapshot of the relevant pages of the handbook for the LEA's selected program monitoring validations item. LEA should review the handbook for suggested documentation, guidance, and submission instructions. For the validation, the LEA may review the handbook for documentation requested, instructions for assembling documentation, the documentation review process, as well as resources and statute references. LEAs must provide documentation that they provided timely and meaningful consultation with participating private schools. These are continued pages of the handbook sections of that requirement in which the LEA is being validated. It continues with statute references, specific program provisions and assurances, compliance report requirements, and TEA contact information for questions. LEAs must submit documentation from the past year through the Federal Program Compliance Division's Program Monitoring Validations Work App. The EASA Section 1117 provides the statutory requirements for the Title I Part A program. The LEA must maintain inventory control of PMP purchases for Equitable Services. The LEA must keep control of all funds titled to materials, equipment, and property purchased for Equitable Services. The ESA Section 8501 provides the statutory requirements and the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 34, Section 299.9, citation references for Title 8 programs. Title 8 programs include Title 2 Part A, Title 3 Part A, Title 4 Part A, and Title 4 Part B. The statute LEAs must keep control of funds in the Title II, all purchases for PMP Equitable Services. Program-specific provisions and assurances relating to the Title I Part A PMP requirement, maintaining inventory control of PMP purchases for Equitable Services state. The control of Title I Part A funds and Title II materials, equipment, and property purchased with such funds shall be in a public agency, and a public agency shall administer such funds, materials, equipment, and property. Assurances relating to the Title VIII PMP program services may be found in the ESA Consolidated Federal Grant Application. The Title VIII program refers to sections 8501 through 8504. You may click the link to learn more about the Title VIII program-specific provisions and assurances. On the 21-22 LEA Compliance Report, one of the LEA program compliance self-check indicators are for the LEA to maintain inventory control of purchase for PMP Equitable Services. On the ESA Consolidated Federal Grant Application, the LEA must keep procedures to maintain and control the PMP's technology, equipment, and supplies purchased for Equitable Services programs. LEAs are required to submit specific documentation that provides evidence of LEA internal control policies and procedures were in place. Acceptable evidence could include a copy of written policies and procedures regarding purchases of PMP technology, equipment, and supplies for Equitable Services, and one sample of dated agendas, consultation notes, and/or other documentation specifying LEA maintains control of the PMP Equitable Services purchases and the inventory list of items purchased for PMP Equitable Services on one private school campus for each participating ESA program. With this particular requirement, the LEA is required to submit these 3 bullets of documentation to support it maintained inventory control of PMP purchases. Documentation required for this program monitoring validation item is that written documentation supporting the LEA's internal control policies and procedures were provided. Issues that may result in an improvement needed status are auditable documentation requested from the previous year was not submitted. Documentation submitted did not specify requested PMP validation requirements. Documentation did not provide the previous year's inventory purchases per participating PMP school, or the documentation did not indicate the LEA maintained control of purchases in the past year. These are just a few examples that would not meet the requirement. Now I will share a few of the program monitoring validations process resources that are available through TEA. We have several program monitoring online resources for the overall process, such as the Program Monitoring Validation Process Handbook, instructions for submitting documentation, training video and training slides, navigating the Smartsheet work app system, guidance documents for each program and requirement, training videos and slides for each of the program requirements. This is where the district can find all program-related tools and resources for the ESA program monitoring validations. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this short video regarding the selected LEA program monitoring validation. Thank you for all you do for students and families that you serve. You do make a difference. Thank you for attending the session. If there are any questions following this training, feel free to call or send an email to Lenitra Guest, PNP Ombudsman and Title IV Part A Program Director, or reach out to your local ESC. Thank you and have a wonderful day.